The anime begins with a boy who boards the train to go to work, but is suddenly pushed by another person, causing him to crash into the watermelons of a girl named AI, who tells him that her watermelons cushion the blow. After this, the boy tells us that his life is a nightmare and that he has a very questionable job. Later, he claims that he met this girl while he was going to school and that on their first meeting she hit him on the head with her watermelons. Since that day, every Monday the boy meets her on the train since she has asked him to be her bodyguard while they are on the train. When a certain Monday arrives, AI gives the protagonist a button from his shirt and says goodbye to him, wishing him a good day at work. Later, a girl named Koi helps her office boss with his work since the other workers have quit. After finishing, they meet with some partners to talk about work, which apparently results in total success. Then, they both say goodbye, and that's when Koi invites him to have something to eat, but he checks his cell phone and realizes that his superior wants him back in the office to work. Therefore, Koi decides to accompany him since he recognizes that he works a lot. At night, the two continue working. At this, Koi gets scared as he sees that the computer screen is moving on its own. However, the boss realizes that it is because of his watermelons, which won't stop tapping on the keyboard. The next day, they both return home on the train extremely tired. As a few days pass, the protagonist's boss scolds all his workers, including him, stating that they do nothing right, which stresses the protagonist. Later, the boss decides to go to the gym on his day off to calm down a bit. When he gets there, a girl welcomes him and teaches him the exercises he can do, while his watermelons don't stop bouncing. After several exercises, she is surprised that the boss lasted so long, since she mentions that most end up giving up. In the end, the girl congratulates him and gives him some water. Arriving on Monday, AI meets the protagonist on the train, where he tells her that he went to the gym, but that he will not go again since he ended up very exhausted. However, she approaches him with her watermelons and claims that his abs are very strong. After this, we meet the boss, who receives a poorly done job from one of his employees, but on this occasion he treats him kindly. Later, he returns to the gym where the girl named Trainer greets him. As the days go by, we see Ai's alarm ringing, while she stops it as best she can and realizes that she has a meeting with her school committee. So he gets up, brushes his teeth and has a rather peculiar meal for breakfast. Finally, he finishes dressing and leaves his house to take the train. Upon arriving, she sits down to talk to a boy while the protagonist appears. By doing so, he feels betrayed and remembers the first day he met AI. Then, he starts to say that AI is a very pretty girl and different from all the others since her watermelons are very big. Furthermore, he states that he would like to have her as a girlfriend. Back to his memory, the protagonist stands in front of AI on the train, while she gives him a button stating that, unlike the previous one, that button is from her work uniform. Saying this, he gets off the train and says goodbye to it. As another week passes, AI and the protagonist meet on the train. Then, she tells him that she has been on a diet since she will have a physical test at school, and she has realized that she weighs more than she should. Just at this, her stomach begins to rumble, which makes her a little uncomfortable as the protagonist notices. Consequently, she asks him to close his eyes while she gets a button to give him as a lucky charm. Therefore, he listens to him, so AI starts moving his watermelons until one of the buttons on his shirt falls off. Later, AI hands it to the protagonist while realizing that he is really very tall. Already at school, AI is hugged by one of her friends, who begins to play with her watermelons, mentioning that she is surely wearing a very elegant bra for the physical test. Later, when the time for the test arrives, AI climbs up to the weight which marks 50 kilos. However, she asks her friend for help, who lifts her watermelons to weigh less. However, the manager writes on his sheet that it weighs 50 since it is not okay to cheat. Finally, AI measures her height, realizing that she is smaller than she thought, so she tells her friend that she will drink more milk to grow like her. The next day at the office, one of the employees invites Koi to a party to have a good time, but she tells her that she can't go. However, the girl continues to insist and tells her that her boyfriend, who is at a distance, surely won't let her go. Then, her boss states that he cannot go since that day they have to meet with some partners. Just at this, the superior arrives where they are to see the work they do. However, Koi ends up getting drunk from drinking so much alcohol. As a result, he begins to say things he shouldn't, claiming that his boss's cat gives him delicious massages, which doesn't sound very good to the superior. Therefore, the boss takes her home loaded, while telling her that she does not have to drink so much, since she must take care of her reputation as a woman. To which she responds that her parents always tell her that, but that she only behaves like that when she is around him since she knows she can trust him. The next day, the boss invites her to eat something before continuing working. so Koi accepts and tells him that he wants to go home since his cat massages his watermelons very well. As summer arrives, the protagonist complains about the heat before getting on the train, where he meets AI, but on this occasion, since there are not many people, she manages to sit in one of the seats while holding the protagonist's briefcase. Then, she tells him that she will soon be on vacation, to which he is happy for her, but mentions that he doesn't have vacations from his job, although he would like to very much. Subsequently, she states that despite having vacations, she will have to study for the admission exams. In addition, she tells him that she will go to the pool and the sea with her friend, who is the captain of her school's volleyball team. Lastly, he also shows her that she will have to go buy a new swimsuit since the only one she has is the one she wore to school. Upon hearing this, the protagonist feels a little jealous as he imagines the other boys trying to flirt with her. Already in the office, the boss tells everyone that they must hand in their work on time, and if they don't they will have to work overtime. Right at this, AI sends a photo to the protagonist wearing her new swimsuit. In addition, she mentions that she wants to go with him to the sea so she can use him and leave him a memory of the summer. Seeing this, the protagonist decides to stop working on the weekend to escape with AI. The following Monday, we see the protagonist with a pain in his mouth, so AI checks him and realizes that one of his teeth is not right, so he recommends he go to the dentist. To which he tells him that the doctor at his office recommended he go. So, she takes advantage of the moment and explains that she also went to the doctor, who told her that she had a large spot on her watermelons after doing an X-ray examination. Just then, the train moves a little, causing the protagonist to crash into its watermelons, which apparently causes him a little pain. However, she tries to hide it and gives the protagonist a pill for his dental pain. Later, the protagonist arrives at the dentist's room, where he is treated by a woman, who places her watermelons on his face to help him with his tooth pain. When finished, the protagonist leaves and sees his boss enter since apparently he also had a dental accident. Later, the protagonist visits the store where AI works and realizes that she is very responsible in her work, since she serves all the customers in the best way, even though they only stare at her watermelons. Then, when taking her order, AI tells the protagonist that her work ends at 7 p.m., so she asks him to wait for her. Therefore, the protagonist accepts and asks to eat a piece of cake. When he finishes, he notices that one of the buttons on Ai's uniform is about to fall off due to his giant watermelons, so it tries to fix it. Later, AI takes off her uniform to leave, stating that she has lost a lot of buttons lately. Afterwards, he meets the protagonist and gives him the buttons. The following week, AI complains to the protagonist about the marathon she has to run at her school, stating that those who have extra weight like her should run less distance. Then, when it's time for the marathon, AI starts running while her watermelons don't stop jumping, causing the boys to watch her closely until her friend arrives to cover her. In this, AI realizes that her friend doesn't bounce as much on watermelons as she does, so she starts playing with them to discover their secret, to which she explains that it's all due to her way of running, since that there is no need to move your breasts so much. Additionally, he asks if she is wearing the bra she told him to which AI states that she is. However, since she doesn't believe him, she starts massaging her watermelons, until she realizes that she was telling the truth. In the end, AI manages to reach the goal and sends a photo to the protagonist, who is working. When he sees the photo, he is happy and decides to try a little harder despite being tired of working. The next day we see a girl in a school uniform, stating that as an adult she will impress the protagonist, and this is when he wakes up from his dream and goes shopping at a store where he meets the same girl, but now as an adult. Subsequently, he serves her like every day and gives her what she always buys. After this, the protagonist gets on a bus while remembering how in his adolescence he enjoyed the company of this girl. Later, he meets the girl again, named Tokimori, who tells him that after graduation she stayed to work in her father's store. Furthermore, they both go for a walk together until she invites him to eat a meatloaf at the store. The following Monday, the long-awaited Christmas arrives, so winter begins, while AI sees Koi very close to his boss. At this moment, the protagonist appears, who stands next to AI and asks her what she has done during Christmas, to which she responds that not many things. Then, they both wait for the train, but since it takes a while to arrive, AI asks the protagonist if they can go to his house, to which he immediately begins to imagine things. However, the train appears so they both get on it. However, due to the snow, the train stops. Then, AI tells the protagonist that during Christmas she has been working, since they are giving a bonus to those who do it. Furthermore, he tells her that he doesn't want to grow up yet. Suddenly the train moves a little, so the protagonist hugs AI so that she doesn't get hit. Therefore, the two end up being very close, so she takes advantage and whispers in his ear that she was just lying since she is actually quite an adult. Then, she says goodbye to him and mentions that her bra size is bigger than it was a few years ago. The next day, we meet Koi, who gets out of bed when he hears the alarm on his phone. Then, she takes off her clothes and goes into the bathroom, where we can appreciate her pretty figure. Next, she chooses the underwear she will wear, mentioning that a transparent panty would be better. At this moment, she remembers that she has to help her boss with a job, so she rushes to get to the train on time, without realizing that her skirt doesn't fit well. Later, the people who see her, especially the boys, go crazy when they see how she is dressed, but since Koei is so clueless, she doesn't even notice anything. When she arrives at work, she meets her boss, who greets her kindly and notices that her underwear is very visible. So he decides to tell her before he becomes more embarrassed, which makes Koei uncomfortable, who states that he will no longer be able to get married. In addition, he begins to joke, mentioning to the boss that he will have to take care of her. After a few days, AI visits the protagonist at his house, and while watching the movies he comes across several movies with quite peculiar content, which is only for those over 18 years of age. Seeing this, the protagonist is embarrassed and AI begins to scold him, stating that this is not right, although he affirms that he recognizes that men have that need. Also, she is amazed to see that the girls wear the same uniform that she uses at work, to which the protagonist mentions that this is the case since those uniforms attract a lot of attention from the boys and that surely in her work has felt without clothes because of the stares of men. However, she says no and continues to scold him when he watches another of his movies on the floor, so she crushes the DVD with her foot, causing the protagonist to be hurt. The next day, AI puts on her uniform to work and remembers the protagonist. So later, he decides to go to his apartment. When she arrives, he finds her outside and invites her in. In addition, he makes her tea while she apologizes for destroying her DVD. Later, AI gets up and shows the protagonist her work uniform so that he can excuse her. And it is here when we see that the light in the room goes out for a moment until a delivery man arrives with a delivery for the protagonist. Therefore, AI opens the door to greet him, leaving the delivery man with his mouth open because his watermelons are about to come out of his uniform. Then, she hands the package to the protagonist, who shows her that he has ordered anime series to watch. However, she gets angry thinking that these are probably just movies about girls showing off their watermelons, and saying this, her own watermelons are revealed to the protagonist. At the end of the vacation, the protagonist and AI meet as usual at the train stop. While there, the protagonist removes a petal from Ai's head, to which she points out that she has another one on her watermelons, so she asks him to remove it as well. However, he replies that it's better not to which she laughs, mentioning that she was just playing. Later, they both get on the train, where AI looks at the protagonist and asks him what he did during the vacation. In response, he tells her that he was working as always and that now that he finally sees her he feels happy. Consequently, AI hands him 2 buttons and tells him that the night before she was watching a movie with her younger sister where men squeeze their breasts to show their strength. So they both started to compete, and although her sister managed to open his shirt with her watermelons, she beat him and ended up taking off 2 of his buttons, which her mother found very funny since she is the one who always told them, "Fix the clothes." Back from the memory, the protagonist mentions to AI that his sister seems to be interesting, to which she asks him if he likes younger girls, to which he answers no. With that said, AI goes to her school, and when she arrives she meets her friend, who begins to play with her breasts while telling the boys that they have nothing to look at since those watermelons are hers. In addition, she states that they are bigger, to which AI tells him that they grew a little more. Later, Ai's sister comes to her classroom to deliver something to her, so her friend takes advantage and tells her to sit on her lap, while hugging her suspiciously. On the other hand, we see the protagonist, who holds Ai's buttons to start working. Later, we see the protagonist leaving his apartment, but first he encounters a rather loving scene before going to work. Later, we meet the student council president, who meets with the teacher, whom she tells to get out of the way and stop looking at her students' watermelons, to which he gives permission, while the other girls tell the president that apparently they don't like the teacher very much. In response, she tells them that he is a liar. It is then when we go back a little in time and see the president, called Megami, seduce the professor by asking him to go out with her, even if it is in secret. However, he gives him an X and refuses to do it. However, Megami affirms that sooner or later he will end up accepting his proposal. In this way, time passes and Megami becomes the most popular girl in school, attracting the attention of the boys and apparently also that of the teacher. And so time passes until Megami becomes president of the council, being loved by all the teachers who speak highly of her. After this, Megami tries to approach the teacher and tells him that a boy asked her out. However, he pretends to be silent and does not answer anything. Therefore, she holds his head against her watermelons and then runs away, mentioning that she will reject the boy for him. As time goes by, Megami turns 18, so she keeps trying to seduce the teacher by mentioning her bra size, which drives him crazy. When the day of his graduation arrives, Megami approaches the professor and says goodbye to him with tears in his eyes, stating that he will overcome it. However, at night Megami arrives at his apartment and shows him that she is no longer one of his students, so he can tell her the truth about what he feels for her. Then, he hugs her and reveals his feelings to her. As a result, Megami begins to cry and confesses that she just recorded what he said. Later, the teacher grabs her and puts her in his apartment, even though she tells him that she doesn't feel ready yet. The following week, Koi and his boss arrive at the airport with the purpose of taking a business trip. However, she tells him that she wants to enjoy the place where they are going since she has heard that there are many delicious things to eat. Arriving at the luggage area, one of the attendants checks them both. So Koi opens his arms, leaving his watermelons in front of him. At this, the manager realizes that she has something suspicious on her breasts, to which she takes out the keys that her boss gave her and hands them over. Already on the plane, one of the flight attendants tries to help the boss by closing one of the luggage compartments. However, Koi gets up to help her, creating a rather uncomfortable scene for her boss, who doesn't know what to do while their watermelons keep bouncing. Later, both meet with the company's partners and present the plans they have. When finished, the two return to the hotel even though Koi felt like celebrating. Then, the boss accidentally finds himself leaving the bathroom, so he quickly closes the door and decides to go to sleep. The next day, they both return to the airport, where Koi is detained again because of his boss's key. On the other hand, we see Megami, who shows her new swimsuit to the teacher, who refuses to take her to the beach since he does not want other men to see her. Therefore, Megami tells him that she wants to go to show off her body, since maybe she can meet her former classmates. Plus, she promises to hold his arm while they walk along the beach. However, the teacher refuses until he ends up convinced by Megami, who tells him that if they go he will be able to enjoy his marks because of the sun. The next day, the protagonist meets the professor and realizes that he is his neighbor. In addition, he begins to feel jealous when he sees that Megami treats him very well when he arrives at his apartment, so he begins to wish he had the same with AI. Just then, she writes to him to ask him out, to which he immediately accepts her invitation, which makes AI happy, who shows him the place where he wants to go. The next day, the two meet at a supermarket to begin their trip. So the protagonist tells AI to put on her seatbelt to start, to which she does so, stating that her watermelons are tight. On the way, AI worries about the protagonist and mentions that he sees him more tired than before, to which he confesses that his neighbors are noisy and that is why he has not been able to sleep well. So she responds that she must tell them to be quiet. However, he explains that it is not that easy. On the other hand, we see Megami, who feeds the teacher while asking him if he likes the food he is giving him better or the food he gave him last night. On the other hand, the protagonist and AI arrive at the farm they want to visit, where they stand to feed the animals and see how a caretaker treats the cows, although AI notices that the protagonist was focused on other things. Finally, they visit the sheep, which get very close to AI. At the end of the day, they both eat ice cream and decide to return home. On their way back, they stop at a car wash, where a worker begins to clean the car, sticking her chichis to the glass, which distracts the protagonist a little, who is scolded by AI. Later, he tells AI that he really liked being with her, to which she replies that he probably also liked milking, since he seemed to do it very well. Having said that, he takes her home, even though AI didn't seem to want that. The following week, these two meet on the train, where AI mentions that he looks better than before, to which he responds that he has been able to sleep better. On the other hand, we meet the teacher, who apparently is sick. So Megami takes care of him and tells him to call the school to let them know that he won't be going to teach. Then she feeds him and lies down next to him. At this moment, the teacher wakes up and measures Megami's finger using a train. On the other hand, Koi is surprised to hear what his boss tells him about a man who was looking for a ring for his wife, to which he mentions that he should stop going to his house so much since doing so would hurt him. He is sending signals. However, Koi falls to the ground completely drunk. Back with the teacher, he arrives at his apartment and gives the ring to Megami, stating that he wants to be her husband. Having said that, she begins to cry, mentioning that she could not record what she said. Returning to the present day, the protagonist tells AI that his neighbors have moved. The next day, AI is preparing to go to school with her sister when they realize that their new neighbors are Megami and the teacher. The next day, Ai's mother finds a bra in the middle of the wall, so she asks her daughters if they know who it is, to which they say no since it is too big. Then, their mother claims that it is not hers either since she stopped wearing that style when they were born, and that it was because of wearing those bras that they were born. After this, the girls take the bra to Megami, who admits that it is hers. In addition, she invites them in and tells them that she just married her high school teacher, which surprises them very much. So they affirm that it was surely a forbidden love, to which Megami tells them that 16-year-old girls' years they can get married. Right at this moment, Ai's sister remembers when she went to her friend's house because of the rain, and while there she almost ended up without clothes because of her. On the other hand, AI begins to think about the protagonist, while Megami offers her advice to seduce him. However, AI changes the subject and asks her if she has photos of the wedding. to which she answers no, since not all people like to see a student married to a teacher. However, he affirms that they will still have it since he convinced the teacher to have one. The next morning, the boss has breakfast with Koi while they watch television, and notice how some cheerleaders are being recorded. Then, the boss remembers a photo that Koi sent him, to which she asks him if he already deleted it. However, he does not respond and states that they have to go to work. On the other hand, we see the cheerleaders, who steal the glances of all the boys, but especially that of the cameraman, who does not stop recording them closely. At this, we go back a little to see the captain of the cheerleaders, who tells her friend that she wants to be famous, to which he tells her to do whatever she wants. So the girl started by being a cheerleader, while the boy remembers what life was like when they were both little, since they were children they were always together. They bathed together, they played fair and everything else, until suddenly this chitchais began to grow and things got a little uncomfortable. While with his friends, who are looking at a magazine with photos of the girl, he begins to feel a little bad, until she appears and sticks her chitchais to the glass, mentioning that if he wants to see her he can buy a magazine. Having said that, he listens to him and takes one. The next day at school, his friends begin to show him photos of their friend, stating that she has become very famous. On the other hand, the boss stares at a photo on his computer until Koi appears and realizes that the girl in the photo is her. So he tries to run away, but ends up falling to the ground. Days later, everyone in the company takes a vacation, so they have a ping pong tournament, in which the two finalists turn out to be the boss and Koi, who ends up winning the game thanks to her chitchais, which decentralize completely to the boss, who instead of seeing a single ball sees two extremely large ones. At night, the boss wakes up to enjoy the thermal water alone. While there, he hears the voice of Koi, who is in the same situation, but on the women's side. Later, they both talk a little until she asks for some time alone. Therefore, they both meet inside the hotel where Koi starts drinking some beer. Then, they both enter a break room where Koi sits in a massage chair, which causes his watermelons to bounce non-stop. At this time, the superiors wake up to take a bath, so the boss gets up and closes the door so as not to be discovered next to Koi, who is already drunk. The next day, everyone returns from vacation, to which she tells the boss that she would like to return another day with him. Arriving on Monday, AI shows the protagonist a video where the famous girl, Kai, is seen showing her figure in a swimsuit, which doesn't seem right to him. On the other hand, Kai enters the room of his friend, named Fu, wearing a rather seductive swimsuit, to which he asks him if he is not ashamed of being seen like this in the photos. In response, Kai says no, since that has made her very famous. In addition, she begins to tell him that if he wants a section of photos of her in another swimsuit, he can give it to her, to which he begins to imagine that moment, until he gets up and gives him his notebook to copy the homework. Days later, Kai participates in a baseball tournament where he manages to strike out several batters, which makes her even more famous at school. The next day, at school, AI can't reach the top of the blackboard, so her friend grabs her by the watermelons and lifts her up to help her. However, the only thing it causes is that Ai's bra ends up destroyed. Therefore, she asks him to accompany her to buy a new one. When she arrives at the store, the manager measures the watermelons, while her friend watches the process. When finished, Megami comes out of one of the dressing rooms and tells AI that she is there to surprise her husband. In addition, she notices both of their chitchais and gives them advice about choosing the right underwear. At this, AI realizes that Megami is looking for her wedding dress, to which she informs her that they already have a date for the ceremony, and that she wants her to attend it. Then, on the way home, Ai's friend starts imagining herself at a wedding with her, until AI wakes her up before she hits the wall from thinking about something else. When she gets home, Ai's mother surprises her and her sister, celebrating that she already has the biggest watermelons, to which she states that she doesn't want them to grow anymore. Arriving on the wedding day, AI and her sister dress in their best dresses, even though their chitchais did not make it easy for them. When they are ready, they go with their mother to the church, where the teacher arrives and meets Megami, who at first glance looks beautiful. Subsequently, they both stand in front of the priest, who gives them his blessing and says the typical words of a wedding, until the part comes where the teacher must kiss Megami. Once this is done, they both leave the church holding hands, while everyone wishes them the best. In this, we see Kai, who is modeling on a building wearing a wedding dress. Also, we meet the chief and Koi, who stops and states that he wants a dress like Megami's. Later, Megami throws her bouquet backwards for one of the women to catch it. As a result, the bouquet falls directly into the hands of AI, who doesn't know what to do with it. However, this Megami approaches her and wishes her luck with the protagonist, even though she claims that it is too soon. On the other hand, we see Kai sign a contract, while Koi shows a wedding dress to the boss, who decides to continue walking. Arriving on a new Monday, the protagonist approaches the train stop, where he meets AI, who stops him and tells him to keep trying throughout the week.